Hello, everyone, and welcome to Equitable Solutions for Coastal Inundations and Sea Level Rise at the Ocean Vision Summit 2021. We are welcoming more than 2,000 oceanographers and ocean aficionados in this 4-day event. For today's event, if you could all please mute your microphones and turn off your video, we would appreciate it. Please put your questions in the chat with the question as the first word. There will be scientists, panelists, and speakers monitoring the chat to see if any questions can be asked from the audience. Here to start this session is Lorelei Picor.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, good morning for those joining us from around the globe. Welcome to the second day of the Virtual Ocean Vision Summit towards a global ecosystem for ocean solutions. My name is Lorelei Picor. I'm the Secretary General of the Ocean and Climate Platform, which is an international network of over 90 international organizations who were created ahead of COP21. And we bring together actors from NGOs, scientific institutes, foundations, private sector, international organizations, and we're all committed to advocating for better recognition of the ocean climate biodiversity nexus into national and international policy. Today, I have the utmost pleasure of being your moderator for the first part of this session, dedicated to equitable solutions for coastal inundations and sea level rise, with a specific focus on Europe and Africa. So to begin with, of course, allow me to warmly thank our organizers, the Ocean and Visions team, and my dear colleagues at the Ocean and Climate Platform, as well as the AGU for their amazing logistical support. So hopefully by now you are comfortable and well seated behind your screens and ready to start. So we have a wonderful lineup of experts and ocean champions with us to discuss how to collectively address global ocean challenges. As you know, the impacts of climate change increasingly threaten our economies, our communities, as well as marine and coastal ecosystems. Extreme events linked to sea level rise are projected to increase in the coming decades and will be most impactful on our coastlines. Indeed, populations living on the coast continue to densify, and by 2025, which if I may recall is in less than 4 years, we expect more than 70% of the urban population to be living in coastal cities. In light of such predictions, developing innovative coastal solutions to prepare for and cope with the impacts of climate change is becoming increasingly urgent. We need to collectively rethink urban spaces and their surroundings to keep populations safe, to protect infrastructures and ports, and of course, to preserve vital natural habitats. It's actually in this perspective that with the Ocean and Climate Platform, we launched the Cities Project to facilitate the development of public policies and the implementation of adaptation solutions for coastal cities threatened by rising sea levels. And you will hear a little bit more about this from my colleagues in the second half of today's session. But for now, let's focus on the wonderful group of speakers that we have today to start this session on coastal solutions in Europe and Africa and how science can drive sound decision making. So without further ado, let me turn to our first keynote speaker for opening remarks, Ambassador Peter Thompson. You are the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for the Ocean. Welcome, and thank you for being here with us today. Coming yourself from a large ocean state, from Fiji, we all know very well that you're a true ocean advocate, and your leadership in the last few years as Special Envoys made a concrete difference to raise the status of the ocean and the political agenda. So Peter, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lorelei. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly. Oops, your picture's just gone, so I'll proceed. Okay, there's the thumb. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, look, all courtesies observed, and warm greetings to everyone attending this session. Change is a constant, no more so than along our coastlines. Living most of my life close to a shoreline, I've observed how the rise and fall of tides and coastal currents, storm waves, earthquakes, and coastal infrastructure all have their influences on the building up or eroding of the coastline. Near my old home at Naitonitoni in Fiji is a graveyard whose land has been consumed by the sea. Its more adamant gravestones and crosses still emerging from the lagoon as a reminder of what used to be. Being the representative of a Pacific Island country at the United Nations for 7 years, I was often asked to speak about rising sea levels. As you know, the stakes are very high for atoll countries like Tuvalu, Kiribati, and the Marshall Islands. But most, if not all, island countries have the great majority of their infrastructure situated along the shoreline, making them highly vulnerable to rising sea levels. Even as we address the adaptations the small island developing states would have to make in the face of rising seas, my mind would often turn to the low-lying coastlines of the rest of the world, to the continents, to the food basket river deltas of Asia, the great cities built around the world upon alluvial deposits, and the hotels and residences fronting the beaches of the world. With 250 million people living on land below 1 meter above current high tide lines, I wondered whether the world was ready for the changes that are coming. Since those days, the questions remain and the answers are largely unresolved. The context of our times has been defined by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres at COP25 in Madrid and in his State of the Planet speech at Columbia University as humanity being at war with nature, of our willfully destroying the life support systems of the planet. We're at the juncture in history where we must make peace with nature or leave our children and grandchildren to suffer the bitter consequences. If we are going to avoid setting the world on fire by continuing on our current course, one that takes us to well over 3 degrees Celsius global warming by the end of this century, we have to move to a carbon zero world economy by 2050. Do that, and we will have a good chance of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. Sadly, even at 1.5 degrees, the IPCC advises with a high degree of confidence that we will have lost 70 to 90% of tropical coral reefs by the time we reach that level. For someone like me from an island ringed by a mighty coral reef, that projection is of such tragic proportions, it's hard to compute. Rather like if you're from prairies and are told there'll be no more grass, or if you're from the forest lands and you hear there'll be no more trees. We must refuse that future. Without further delay, make the radical transformations required to make peace with nature. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I'd like to tip my hat to the Ocean and Climate Platform and the CITES initiative for sharing solutions before the sea level rise phenomenon hits us like a never-ending hurricane. By doing so, CITES is working in the very best spirit of the principles of precaution and preparedness. You may have heard me before talking about the two great attributes of our species, our ability to share being the bedrock of human society, and our genius for innovation being what has taken us from the Stone Age to the Space Age. The CITES initiative will have to draw on both these attributes to achieve its purpose, and I urge all to get their shoulders to the wheel and support. I don't need to name them, but on every continent there are coastal cities whose ability to deal with the effects of global warming and consequential sea level rise is seriously in question. At the very least, you would expect these cities to be at the forefront of the transformations necessary to curb the anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions that are the root cause of their precarious futures. At this stage, finger pointing is of little value in comparison with committing to the actual transformations in energy, transportation, buildings, and consumption patterns that a net zero carbon economy actually requires. Let's not kid ourselves. Coastal adaptation in the face of rising sea levels, coupled with the storm surges of more frequent ferocious storms, is amongst the most challenging effects of global warming. The political, economic, and social implications of policy and decision-making for affected coastal cities and their surrounding regions will be complex, in many cases, both disruptive and painful. We're going to have to approach the upcoming global conferences in Marseille, Kunming, Glasgow, and Lisbon as an orchestrated campaign to overcome the common enemy of climate change, biodiversity loss, and the decline of the ocean's health. We all know that anthropogenic greenhouse gases are that common enemy, but let us add to them their allies of lethargy, greed, and lack of will. Overcome them, and thousands of coastal settlements around the world will have a fighting chance of survival. I thank the Ocean's Visions and the Ocean Climate Platform for providing me with this opportunity of addressing you today. And I thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for your kind attention. Over to you, Lorelei.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your continuous support and for your inspiring words today again. As usual, you have perfectly set the scene for today's discussion. So without further ado, let's dive into what science has to tell us about sea level rise. We have the privilege of having Dr. Hans Otto Pottner with us today as well. Dr. Pottner, you're the co-chair of the IPCC Working Group 2. You have been absolutely instrumental in the conception and publication of the IPCC special report on the ocean and cryosphere that was launched in 2019, which evaluated the changes, impacts, and risks of climate change on the ocean. Hans, thank you so much for being here, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lorelei. And thanks a lot for this opportunity. And good morning, evening, afternoon, everybody. And thanks a lot for joining us. I would like to give you some numbers behind what Peter Thompson has been telling us about the connection between climate change, sea level rise, and the challenges for biodiversity and society. And the IPCC has been publishing as the first set of reports during the 6th assessment cycle, 3 special reports, one on global warming of 1.5 that told us about the coral reefs, then one on climate change and land that looked at coastal issues already, but then the major one, the ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate, where we were actually covering many of the issues concerned. We were giving our audience an overview of the challenges concerning the ocean. And these challenges involve sea level rise, and sea level rise being due to changes in glacier mass, changes in the melting ice shelves in polar areas, and also we were linking this to other challenges like the melting of sea ice, marine heat waves developing, and also the challenges in the ocean for ocean life and ocean natural resources, like ocean heat content and temperature, ocean pH, and ocean oxygen. And there's one certainly overarching issue that needs to be mentioned here, and that is that our current background concerns unsustainable ocean uses. And this also involves unsustainable uses of our coastline in a way, because as we've heard, a large fraction of our population is living there, and even more will be living there, and this in light of the challenges ahead of us. I would like to refer you to what is actually causing one of the big sets of problems here. And we are here looking at these changes from 2 angles. We are looking at changes as they are elicited by unabated climate change. And this is still an option for us, although we see some ambition rising and activities rising, which is good news. So we have the unabated emissions scenario here, and we compare it to one scenario where we have ambitious emissions reduction. And you see that making this choice actually has a difference on the melting. So we see a less melting of the Greenland ice sheet, less melting of the Antarctic ice sheet, and we see less melting of the world's glaciers. We also see less of an increase in heat content in the ocean, which has also implications for sea level rise. And these are the projections that come from these 2 extreme choices concerning sea level rise. And you see again the unabated emissions one, and you see the ambitious emissions reduction one compared. And we are here taking a long-term perspective until 2300 to really make you aware of what we start and have started and where we are headed, depending on the choices to be made now. So we are having the choice between sea level rise of about and less than 1 meter in a world that is keeping warming to 1.5 degrees, and the choice of several more meters in a world that is actually going into unabated climate change. And these sea level changes are very conceivable, and they fit the context of what we've seen during Earth's history between warm periods and cold periods developing, large oscillations in sea level rise. So we have these choices to do these different processes that we have initiated. But this is not the full story. And we've already heard that the extreme events actually are also part of this. Here on the left-hand side, we are talking about the recent past, where we have a low mean sea level, and we have historically may have had an extreme event once a century that actually brings sea level quite high and challenges coastal defenses. But now what we are doing with an increase in mean sea level, we build these extreme events on top of this increase in mean sea level, indicating that such extremes, which were happening once a century recently, are becoming more frequent and may actually rise a frequency of up to once per year. So this is clearly an additional challenge to be considered. And these exceptional situations are emerging. If you look at this timeline here between 2000 and 2100 and look at the dark dots here indicating when actually during this period these exceptional events may happen, then you see even in this ambitious emissions reduction scenario, keeping us to about 1.5 or 1.6 as a mean, we are seeing these exceptional events indicated by the dark dots coming in early this century. And the more we let global warming kit in, the more this will also affect the higher latitudes. This is important to consider, and there's certainly variability between the different sites that we are looking at. So which are the sites and specifically their characteristics that are to be considered here? We are comparing resource-rich coastal cities with large tropical agricultural deltas, Arctic communities, and urban atoll islands. And here on the left-hand side, you see a column for each that indicates in relation to the different degrees of sea level rise by the end of this century, you see the risk level and how it increases with sea level rise. You see for the resource-rich coastal cities that risk barely touches the red area, which is the high-risk area. We have really scaled risk here from undetectable to moderate to high to very high according to color code. And on the right-hand side, you see the scope for adaptation. And these resource-rich cities have a good chance to keep risk low by the end of this century in relation to the sea level rise expected. But here, if you go to the more low-lying and coastlines and small islands, then you see that with the current adaptation level, we can run into very high risk, especially for these atoll islands. And then if we look at the adaptation capacity, we see that the capacity to reduce that risk and not reach into this very high range is very limited in these low-lying places. This makes it very important to consider different adaptation options. And this is what we've done in this special report. But we have also seen that sort of adaptation options that keep people in place, and this is the dark green area here, are limited the more and the higher the risk level becomes. And for some places, it may be unavoidable to go into planned relocation and abandon the coastlines challenged by sea level rise. This is the important message. There's something coming. We can keep it under control. We have to face, however, some challenges in some places, which may include adaptation measures that we do not really want. So considering sea level rise and coastal extremes, we can say during the 20th century, the global mean sea level rose by about 15 centimeters. Now sea level rise is accelerating. It's rising more than twice as fast and will further accelerate, reaching up to 1.1 meters in 2100 and several meters in 2300 if emissions are not sharply reduced. Extreme sea level events, which now occur rarely during high tides and intense storms, will become more common. And many low-lying coastal cities and small islands will be exposed to risks of flooding and land loss annually by 2050, especially without strong adaptation. So this is a strong warning. Let's do something about it. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hans, for this crystal clear presentation. We now fully understand the state of the ocean in the face of climate change, and the scientific conclusions are without call. We must act now to keep the impacts under control, as you said. So it's quite fitting that this session and that the overall Ocean Vision Summit focuses on boosting ocean solutions, which is a good transition to move to our next panel on regional scientific initiatives from observation to concrete action. So let's warmly welcome our next three panelists, Dr. Karim Ilmi, Dr. Kwasi Epening-Addo, and Dr. Nadia Pinardi. Our fantastic experts are live from the European and African continents to share some insights and some success stories about coastal solutions. So if it's okay with you, I will first turn to Dr. Karim Ilmi. Karim, you're the head of Oceanic Department at the National Institutes of Analytic Research in Casablanca. You're also the vice chairperson of Group 5 of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, IOC UNESCO. Thank you very much for being here with us. Karim, we already have the pleasure of working together with the Ocean and Climate Platform, given that 2021 marked the start of a fundamental decade, the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. IOC UNESCO, of course, has been orchestrating the launch of the decade to promote the science we need for the ocean that we want. That is quite the task. So please, Karim, can you share with us your insights about the UN Decade of Ocean Science and the prospects for the African region? Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Lorley. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Excellencies, dear colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. So I am very honored to participate in this great event, and I would like particularly to thank AGU and OCP to invite me at this session. So as mentioned by His Excellency, Mr. Peter Thompson in his previous talk, so he introduced us very well the subject about the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development 2021-2030, and I try to focus on African continent. Please, the next slide. Thank you. So as you know, the preparation of this decade is very long process. It begins on 2016, and you can see here the many documentation prepared for this decade, and you can find all the documentation in the ocean website, particularly the implementation plan summary prepared by IOC, and in this context. And as you know, the decade is launched the 1st January this year. Next slide, please. There is many, of course, global knowledge gaps concerning all the marine sectors, and this decade try to provide a global framework to support efforts to reverse the cycle of decline in ocean health and to create improved conditions for sustainable development, to structure and to boost the scientific efforts at national and international levels, and to empower governments and societies with science-based solutions. Next slide, please. So the vision is to provide the knowledge system need for policy and action to achieve the global ocean supporting sustainable development by 2030 and beyond, of course. and the mission to have the transformative ocean sciences solution for sustainable development, connecting people and our oceans. The next slide. So there is, please, thank you. So, of course, we don't start at the beginning. The science is largely competent for problem diagnostic. We have observing system for climate, emerging data services. We have a lot of major gaps, particularly for weak ocean literacy. Some finding in research mode. So what we want to be is the sciences need to provide solution and motivation for action, to have more ocean data system for, of course, for the past, present, and future, to develop more ocean literacy, to have a clear value chain leading to resourcing and commitment, and to develop capacity development and to transfer technology. Please, the next slide. So the decade outcomes is articulated into seven outcomes concerning the clean ocean, healthy and resilient ocean, a productive ocean, a predicted ocean, a safe ocean, accessible ocean, and inspiring and engaging ocean. And you have also we have 10 ocean decade challenges coming from pollutants, ecosystem, the food, ocean economy, ocean climate nexus, the risk, observing system, digital ocean representation, the capacity development, and the behavior change. The next slide, please. So the IUC, Intergovernmental Oceanography Commission, is very involved, and his member states very involved in this decade. So it concerns many functions that you see in this slide. Please, for the next slide. And concerning the IUC Africa mission, of course, there is the subcommission dedicated for the African countries, and we have the most mission focused on early warning system monitoring for coastal oceanic natural hazards. Of course, dedicated also to studies on climate change, to manage, mitigate the impacts of coastal hazards and climate change, to reinforce our marine and oceanographic training and research institution, to understand very well the ocean coastal process in the African continent, and to try to create a critical mass of marine sciences professionals. Next slide, please. So in the context of the decades, they have many meetings dedicated for Africa. So here you have some relevant regional consultation for the decade, mainly down in Nairobi on January 2020. Also, we have a regional consultation for Mediterranean Sea down in Venice. We have also a regional consultation for the South Atlantic down in Rio. We have also a regional consultation down in Chennai for Indian Ocean region. We have also organized a mini Ocean Decade virtual series for co-designing the ocean science we need for Africa. And there is the next big African kickoff conference for the UN Decade, which should be organized on December of this year in Egypt. Next slide, please. So the IOC Africa, of course, mission and the programs is concerning all items around the marine sciences for Africa. This is on the left, you can see the programs that we work on this period to 2040 to 2021. And in the blue ones, this is the key topics for to have the orientation of the decade connecting to sustainable bioeconomy, ocean health and resilience, disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, ocean forecasting and prediction, ocean pollution. And actually, concerning the climate change adaptation in coastal zones, so we're going to prepare 4 policies brief on climate change, on adaptation in coastal zones, focusing on sea level rise, implication for low-lying island coasts and communities, changing oceans, marine ecosystems and dependent communities, extremes, abrupt changes and managing risks, and climate change and economy. Also, we try now OCP, Ocean Climate Platform, is very active in our continent, and we try to push to have a little bit some convention between IUC and OCP. So thank you. I think it was the next slide, please. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karim. And of course, you can count on all of us here today to make the UN Decade of Ocean Science the tremendous success that we all made it to be. If I can briefly remind our viewers, that you can use the chat function to ask your questions throughout the event. We will try to take some time to answer the questions at the end of the session. So thank you very much. So now we'll stay on the African continent for a little while with our next speaker, Dr. Kwesi Appiah-Addo. You're the director of the Institute for Environment and Sanitation Studies in Ghana. You're also part of the Regional Scientific Committee of the WACA program. And today you will present some of its work, especially regarding the West African Regional Coastal Observatory, WARCA, which is a regional cooperation mechanism for coastline monitoring and coastal risk reduction in West Africa. So this sounds fascinating. So please, Kwesi, tell us more.
Thank you very much. So let me share my screen. Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on your geographic location, excellencies, colleagues, and participants. Let me thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this very important meeting. I'm giving this presentation on behalf of Dr. Musa Sow, who is the director for the Ecological Monitoring Center, CSC, in Dakar, Senegal. And CSC in Dakar has the mandate to implement the West Africa Coastal Observatory project. So I'm presenting the coastal observation for coastal risk management in West Africa. Let me start by saying that ministers responsible for the environment and coastal erosion management in the 11 West African countries and covered by the West Africa Economic and Monitoring Union, UEMOA, met in Dakar, Senegal in May 18, 2011. And during the meeting, they initiated a study in coastal monitoring and also approved the establishment of a West Africa Coastal Observatory. Thereafter, in 2012, the West Africa Coastal Observation Mission, which we call the MOLWA, was established as a regional operation mechanism for coastal monitoring and coastal risk reduction in West Africa with financial support from UEMOA. The observation mission, which is a decision support system, provides regional and national political decision makers, local authorities, other national and regional organizations, as well as development partners with information on climate change and management of the coastal areas. Within these projects, 4 specific objectives were outlined, and one is to develop and establish collaboration protocols between MOLWA members, defining the modalities of data collection, information sharing, and carrying out useful analysis for the governance and management of the coastal areas in West Africa. Secondly, to develop a framework for national and regional coastal observation indicators that will be used to produce the annual State of the West Africa Coast report. Thirdly, to validate regional coastal zone information sharing platforms and monitoring systems. And lastly, to develop a knowledge products that are based on appropriate analysis, which can support decision-making and can be assessed by various stakeholders, including development of peer-reviewed publications and product, as well as services to improve communications with different stakeholders. And the CSC in Senegal has a mandate, as I mentioned earlier, to coordinate and implement these components in order to ensure continuity and alignment with working principles of MOLWA. So MOLWA project developed the West Africa Coastal Master Plan, which critically examined the coastal zone and identified developments and the dynamics along the coast. And in 2016, the master plan that was developed was shared, is in the public domain now. The 2020 master plan is almost ready. It's going through some validation, and very soon it will be out. And the master plan divides the coastal area into 47 zones and 186 sectors, including Sao Tome and Principe. The sectors in the 11 West Africa countries and Sao Tome and Principe were classified into levels of severity in terms of erosion, such as very high, which we term as critical, high, and moderate. And as you can see on the slide, this shows one of the sections in Gambia, which has been zoned into areas that are indicating critical, areas that are indicating high, and areas that are indicating moderate erosion situation along the Gambia coast. And this has been done for all the 11 countries within West Africa and Sao Tome and Principe. This diagram shows the level of risk in terms of percentage along the entire West Africa coast. And it shows that several areas are at high risk, which needs urgent attention. It's a high risk to erosion and other hazards, which needs urgent attention along the West Africa coast. And you can see that very few areas are showing low risk. And this demonstrates that the entire West Africa coast needs critical attention for effective coastal management. As you can see, if you take Mauritania, for instance, 6% indicates very high, 33% indicates moderate, and 60% indicates high. So this has been done for the 11 countries along the West Africa coast, including Sao Tome and Principe. And it gives an indication of the level of risk along the West Africa coast, which therefore needs urgent action from the countries concerned. The West Africa coastline is basically sedimentary. Therefore, the level of vulnerability is quite high in several areas, as can be seen on the previous slide. So the coastal landscape is made up of different elements, as shown on this slide. And here we can see the percentage of the elements that constitute the coastal landscape in West Africa. And you can see that mangroves covers almost a half of the landscape in West Africa. So mangroves is very critical to the landscape in West Africa. And then we also have areas that are unstable, and these areas are eroding. And then some areas that are quite stable, the rocky areas, but they are in the very minimum in terms of distribution. A study that was conducted as part of this project to understand existing observation structures at all levels in member countries determined or came up with this result. It emerged that the significant observation structures exist at the national level. We try to understand the observation structures that are existing in the sub-region and the themes that these structures are looking at in terms of monitoring, so as to have a fair idea of what is going on in the sub-region as we move towards coming up with a coastal observatory. Because the observatory will help us to harmonize the activities in terms of monitoring in the sub-region. And we also identified that the themes that usually observed and monitored are related to coastal risk, hazards, and shoreline evolution. And these are driven more by erosion and flooding situation. But it was heartwarming to realize that the knowledge about coastal environment is high in the sub-region, which to us is very significant moving forward into determining, areas that are vulnerable and would therefore need effective management. So the West Africa Coastal Regional Observatory, which we call the WACO project, will facilitate effective management of coastal erosion related problems in West Africa. The main objective for WACO is observe to better understand to better decide. It is anticipated that WACO will ensure producing marine weather data, develop a legal and organizational framework, create a platform for sharing and disseminating data, as well as develop a regional alert network for the West Africa coast. Now, this regional alert network will initially be based on existing early warning systems in different countries and areas that are covered by the WACO. The objective of the network will be to develop a pool of harmonized data as well as shared data using a distribution platform, which we call the Vigilance Bulletin. Each country will benefit from this information and make their own decisions on disseminating the information. This regional alert network will monitor hazards causing rapid impact, such as heavy rainfall, floods, marine and coastal pollution, as well as strong winds. The alert network will benefit from data produced by the monitoring system set up in order to improve its vigilant bulletin and also contribute to establishing reliable numerical meteorological and marine models. The regional alert network may set up partnership with foreign or international structures to benefit from their data in order to feed and improve forecasting. Again, the need to increase measuring systems along the West Africa coast has also resulted in the Wave Measurement Network project. Based on available information, analysis have been undertaken to generate initial ideas of the wave measuring network size. And as can be seen from the slide, various areas have been earmarked for the wave measuring network location. And the analysis was based mainly on basic bathymetry using the JEPCO Global Bathymetric Grid, and then marine traffic information produced by Automatic Identification System, AIS. In order to obtain a representative data that can be used at the regional scale, the network will comprise of 19 wave gauges that will be distributed along the coast, as shown on the slide, indicating coordinates of possible location areas. So these are the possible location areas that the networks will be located. So these are some of the things we are doing in West Africa, trying to bring together or harmonizing activities to be able to, because we realize that in trying to solve problems related to erosion in one area affect the next area. So we try to harmonize activities, work as a team in the region so as to bring common solutions to problems that are common to us. On this note, let me say a big thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Kwasi. I really like your tagline, observe to better understand and understand to better decide. Indeed, the dissemination of quality information regarding coastal observation is fundamental in driving sound decision making. So thank you very much for your leadership. So now I'm pleased to introduce our last, but certainly not least, speaker for this panel, Dr. Nadia Pinardi. And now we'll move to Europe. You are a professor of oceanography at Bologna University in Italy. And since 2019, you've also been the vice president of the Commission for Observation, Infrastructure, and Information Systems of the WMO. So you two are working at the interface between science and policy. And as part of the Knowledge Hub on Sea Level Rise, you aim to establish estimates of the local impacts of sea level rise at the shore to help policymakers in defining mitigation and adaptation strategies. So we're really at the heart of a of today's topic. So please, Nadia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lorelei. And thank you, the organizer, for having invited us, me and my co-chair, to present our initial plans. This is a new initiative, and it is really important for us since the beginning to expose our ideas to a wider audience. The Knowledge Hub on Sea Level Rise is a joint initiative of two organizations in Europe that try to focus on climate and oceans. And clearly, we have to get them together. And the climate action is the climate organization tries to find the way for mitigation actions, climate resilient economy, and society and environment aligned with Europe long-term climate objectives. And then JPI Oceans, on the other hand, sorry about that, should go back, yes, is trying to develop a sustainable blue economy which will preserve health and productivity of seas and oceans. So having these two pieces together, which means that we are in direct contact with the policymakers of the ministries in different countries of Europe, then the idea of a knowledge hub on sea level rise came a few years ago. And we have now a vision. The Knowledge Hub on Sea Level Rise will focus on regional to local sea level changes and extremes in Europe, and will foster the involvement of policymaking, scientists, engineers, social scientists, and coastal planning sectors. This is a key for arriving to solutions, as we have seen also in the session of yesterday of Ocean Visions. We like to provide periodic assessments of knowledge on sea level rise, drivers, impacts, and policy options for each of the major ocean basins around Europe. Sorry about that. We would like to organize a series of basin-specific scoping workshops leading to a pan-European expert conference on sea level rise in 2022. And I see here that Ocean Visions is ahead of us, has already done these scoping workshops, and but it's a good practice. It's a very important practice, and we should start to do it more and more. So who are we? We try to organize ourselves on 4 task groups on key aspects of the Knowledge Hub. And our 4 task groups to start with will be a co-design task group trying to get ideas from multiple stakeholders to create 3 scoping workshops in 2021 and a conference in 2022 to arrive at the European Coast Sea Level Rise and Extreme Events Assessment Report. So it will be a synthesis task group. The policy task group, which is very important, where we will try maximum interface between science and policy toward an inventory of sea level rise policy measures at European level, at national level, and even local, with adequate policy analysis. The science task group, which will be clearly reviewing the scientific knowledge and finding the gaps, and even addressing issues on priorities for science data and modeling to go ahead in a transformative way. And outreach task group, also of very big importance, which will consult with local, national, European stakeholders to find out what are the main output products that are important for the coastal communities. So we had already an initial expert consultation, which was actually very favorable to have the Knowledge Hub between JPI oceans and JPI climate. And the recommendations are that we have in Europe now a basic observing and predicting infrastructure, which is based upon Copernicus and Emanuele, first of all, and that should be supported and integrated. The need is to bridge spatial scales, global to regional, region to local, bridge disciplines, oceanography, glaciology, meteorology, hydrology, geomorphology, social sciences, policy and communication, accelerate the research to operations and operation to research transfer, which is still lagging behind the research on one hand and operations on the other. Use the new science paradigms to arrive at solutions. And what are we talking about when we talk about new science paradigm? The new science, the 21st century science paradigm is what we believe should be defined by three words: systemic, holistic, and convergent. And looking only at the last word, this new science should be transdisciplinary integration of life sciences, physical science, engineering, and beyond. So the need, it was recognized by Europe that we need a sea level rise assessment at a basin local scale that will translate IPCC important contribution at the local scale, and that will make science information usable and make available information on long-term future sea level rise implications and adaptation preparedness. So, and not last, develop a method for co-design. Yesterday at the previous Ocean Vision session, there was a lot of discussion about this, and a lot was recognized this to be, a lot of people recognize this is a key. So we have to develop science policy practitioner interfaces that will work, will tell us what are the problems, and use cases if possible, use pilot studies like the one that probably will come out from this summit. So we know we have a long way to go. We need, if we want to bring information to societal benefit, we have to keep track of the ocean information value chain that starts from input information from observations, especially satellite and in situ, which then goes through the generic information processing and production, what is called the global data production information, data and information production system, which is WMO, and soon will become GOOSE. And then for what? For intermediate users. Intermediate users are very important in this chain, and they are the one that can further translate the information to the specific needs, up to user customized information. So this chain, I think, cannot be, we think, cannot be shortened. It requires the different pieces because of the different expertise. The existing observing and predicting infrastructure should be accessible, transparent, informative for observations and model data from the open ocean and the coasts. We have a first one, Copernicus Marine Service. Data are available, but now is only open ocean. We have to design the coastal serving to this the same way that now anybody, everybody can access information at the global coastal, the global level. We would like to have it at the global coastal level. Okay, so the knowledge gap. We know we have gap. Here I show you a big gap. Extreme event of Aqua Alta, November 12, 2019. You know, Venice is being the site of the most instrumented area in the world, is the most instrumented area in the world. And forecast of such an extreme event started 11 o'clock and of November 12. And the forecast was done for 13 of November, and the level arrived at the forecast was 140 centimeters, while the event was 183 centimeters. Okay, so now from large scale models such as Copernicus is giving, we were able to get 150 centimeters. And these are only large scale models. So the question we have, but actually this started November 10. So here, the knowledge gap. Local coastal forecasting models still do not forecast early enough, are less accurate than basin scale models most of the time. So here is the new innovative approach. We have the new science, seamless predictions and urban oceanography, which I will not talk today, but show you how much we have evolved into this seamless prediction. So now it is feasible. Yesterday, somehow it was discussed. And we have data to compare our model forecast, and we have sea level forecasts that now reach accuracy that was unthinkable even 5 years ago. So the Governing Council knowledge of the knowledge hub on sea level rise now is made out of 8 countries in Europe. We are continuously enlarging. That means that we have the policy-making relationship with the different countries, and we hope to develop soon. So in conclusion, my final considerations. My final considerations are coming especially from this very interesting paper of Louis Uccellini from your NOAA National Weather Service that states that the metrics of success have changed from purely the accuracy of forecasts to how well the basic infrastructure that produces such data collaborates internally and externally, and how well forecasters prepare decision makers and the public to understand and act on impacts. And so the problem is much more, is this co-design, is this involvement, is this partnership? So Knowledge Hub is one way to provide an innovative science policy interface in collaboration with existing European platforms. Knowledge Hub will initiate a practice for continuous stakeholder consultation, like I guess Ocean Vision and the summit is sponsoring. And I really hope that Ocean Vision Summit and Knowledge Hub activities will enter to be an important part of the UN Decade of Ocean Science. And we have already worked together in the CoastPredict program proposal, which we hope will fly soon. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nadia, for your very insightful presentation. And you're definitely preaching to the choir, so you can count on us, and we look forward to further discovering your science policy interfaces. So thank you so much. This has been a fantastic first panel on the role of science in driving decision-making and striving for sound coastal solutions. So thank you to our great speaker, and a huge round of virtual applause to Karim, Kwasi, and Nadia. I see that questions are coming in the chat, so we'll get back to you in a few minutes. But now let's welcome our 2 final speakers for the lightning round of scientific projects. Mr. Harold Diaz and Mr. Max Rademacher. I did my very best to well pronounce your name, so apologies if I didn't. Welcome to you both, and you actually both develop innovative tools in the domain of coastal risk management. So if that's okay, I'll start first with Harold. You're a specialist of coastal hydrodynamic processes and remote sensing, and you're currently a research engineer at Waves and Sea to work on the determination and analysis of wave parameters, as well as georeferencing, imagery, and monitoring for short and long-term coastal changes. I'm going to pause here because that sounds incredibly complex, however, very fascinating. So please, can you tell us a bit more and provide some more details to better understand coastal dynamics at different scales? Thank you.
Thanks to you, Lurley. So I think you have my presentation. Yes, that's it. So hi, everyone. First of all, thank you very much to all the organization team for giving us the opportunity to present our work here today. So I hope this presentation helps to highlight the need of new technologies to afford climate change adaptation measures and the importance of this being sufficiently robust and flexible to focus our efforts at different timescales. So today we will talk about the coastal video monitoring. So please, next slide. So that said, I would like to briefly introduce ourselves. We are a startup that has a cooperative governance, which means that each worker owns the company and defines its priorities. Created from public research 5 years ago by our CEOs, Théophile, we have been working to implement a biotechnology which is already widely used in the academic world in an operational and simple way, so that a wide spectrum of users can obtain valuable information from coastal environments. This information can range from simple observation, as videos and images, to obtaining metrics in a very dynamic environment. So please, next slide. For the scope of this presentation, this information can be classified into two timescales. From one side, we have the short and mid-term observation that allow us to measure the impact of rapid and extreme punctual events as storms that, as we know, in the context of climate change, will become more and more frequent. And then, on the other hand, we can imagine the long-term observation, what will help to assess the efficiency of protection works, measuring and directly observing the effects of sea level rise, and observing and anticipate big trends in accretion and erosion patterns. So please, next slide. To accomplish those short and long-term observation goals, we implement a light installation video system, which allows us to both the observation and the acquisition of a large number of physical parameters, all this in an operational continuous basis. In addition, the integration of morphological and aerodynamic data offers a complete understanding of the local dynamics of our study sites. Please, next. There are many instruments for obtaining data on coastal dynamics environments, but only a few that allow direct and continuous observation at a reasonable cost. So, and again, the video is one of the most versatile tools that we have. Please, next. Thanks to this versatility, video offers a unique opportunity to have a flexible tool. To illustrate, here we have some our real application cases that we have been working on. So the first case that we have been working on was in the Vietnam Mekong Delta, where we have done some aerodynamic studies. Then we move on to France to do some overtopping prevention in Etretat, some shoreline monitoring in Cannes, then some before study in Merlimont, before the works study in Merlimont, and then our big project now in this moment at Port La Nouvelle in France, where we are monitoring the environmental impact of a harbor facility expansion. Please, next slide. So this is important. So what does video monitoring looks like? Well, here's an example in Port La Nouvelle, the same port that I just talked about, where we have captured the biggest winter storm of 2021, with waves going up to 5 meters offshore and a surge about 1 meter, which is a lot for the Mediterranean coast. So in this animation, we have put several pieces of information together during the course of this storm to visualize how the sea interacts with the beach in this urban sector. So in the top panel, we have a panoramic view of the 3 cameras that we have installed there. In the bottom left panel, we have the same images, but georeferenced, so they are projected in a Cartesian plane, so we can get measured of it. And in the bottom right panel, we can see how the height of the wave and the sea level increases during the course of this storm. So what we can observe here is that the overtopping and flooding are not explained by the surge alone, but by the joint effect of tide and wave setup and run up. This is well documented in the literature, but video monitoring offers a unique opportunity to observe it directly. So among other advantages about direct extreme event observation, we might be able to identify vulnerable points, such as the parking and the seaside casino in this case. So and consequently, we can improve the damage mitigation measures at those points. Please, next slide. So on the other hand, we can have long-term applications, having in mind these images that we project in a map. So in the upper panel, we can see where waves coming from the right. We can observe that how the width of the northern beach goes from its annual maximum to its minimum values due to the action of the two energetic storms, and then it starts to recover progressively. As this brief example shows, this type of analysis can be used to monitor seasonal behavior, identify extreme events, and assess the extent of climate change mitigation measures in the long term. Please, next slide. So finally, our mission has always been to make this valuable information accessible to a wide range of people. So we have designed a web platform where users can exclusive access not only to images and videos, but also to customized indicators and integrated data. So this can truly constitute a means for decision making. So feel free to contact us to discuss further about the capabilities of this great technology. And thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Harold, for explaining so clearly how you use cameras and smart algorithms to understand coastal dynamics at different timescales, and for providing some concrete means for decision making. That's really interesting. So thank you. And now let's hear from our final speaker, Max. So while you were pursuing your PhD in coastal engineering at the University of Technology in the Netherlands, you have also co-founded Upscape. And Upscape provides some affordable and robust observation networks for oceanographic and meteorological conditions. So can you please tell us more about Upscape and give us some insights about how to fight data scarcity where, you know, in the places where climate change hits us the hardest. So Max, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. At Upscape, we develop and sell environmental monitoring equipment, and we consider it our mission to make real-time environmental observations available to anyone who needs it. It will be clear to you that observation data are really key to increase our global resilience against sea level rise and climate change in general. But at the same time, there's also a very big lack of observation data in many places, and especially also in those places where the data are most needed, in highly vulnerable places. And the main reason for that is basically the cost prohibitiveness of many existing monitoring solutions, either because the initial purchase price of the equipment is very high, or because the maintenance costs are high, or because there's an annual license fee associated with the access to the data. And that has brought us to our product philosophy at Upscape, which first and foremost aims to make our equipment affordable, but also with low maintenance costs, making it easy to install, operate, and maintain. And then that third bullet is a very important one, because in practice, it turns out that theft is a very big limiting factor for collecting environmental observations in many places. If you put anything out that looks like it represents any value, it might get vandalized or taken away, which is why we have chosen to give our products at Upscape a rather discreet design, with solar panels integrated flat into the faces of the device, such that they don't look very expensive or attractive. And that design has proved to be very secure when it comes to limiting theft. That brings me to our product range. On the right-hand side of this page, you can see what we call the power and telemetry module of PTM. I'm holding one here now. That's being masked out. I'm holding one in my hands right now as well, so you can see the size. And this power and telemetry module has got solar panels on its sides, which supply power. Inside it is a cellular modem and an optional satellite modem, which take care of data transmission to our data portal. And by connecting different sensors to this power and telemetry module, we can turn it into different device types, such as a radar-based water level gauge, which is obviously very good for observing sea level and sea level rise on the long term, but also a weather station, a rain gauge, a time-lapse camera. And on the left-hand side of the page, you see our buoy-based products, which are basically just power and telemetry modules with a different form factor. And that wave buoy in the top left corner is around 10 times cheaper than existing convenient wave measurement buoys. So that hugely helps in making wave data more accessible. Then this is a snapshot of our data portal, which is included free of charge for the entire lifetime of the device with your device purchase. We have a strong conviction that the user should not be made to pay to view their own data. And the actual project that you're seeing here on the screen is the project that we are running for the Durban municipality in South Africa, or the eThekwini municipality as their local name sounds. Durban is set at the Indian Ocean coastline of South Africa at the east coast. And it faces quite some environmental challenges. It very frequently faces coastal flooding, riverine flooding, or flash flooding due to high rainfall. And the Durban municipality decided a few years ago to put together a flood early warning system, or in general, an early warning system to mitigate the effects of all these environmental disasters. And part of that solution was to deploy a monitoring network of OPSCAPE sensors. You can see the full list of what was installed throughout the municipality area here on the slide. And this was combined with the flood early warning system from the Dutch Institute Deltares, which is basically a collection of computer forecast models that forecast things like water levels, rainfall, and waves. And the combination of this OPSCAPE monitoring network with the flood early warning system from Deltares proved to be a perfect combination for the municipality to mitigate the effects of flooding. Well, we at OPSCAPE, we continue to increase our global footprint. And with that, we are very happy to contribute in making the world a bit more resilient. Thank you for your attention.
Great, thank you so much, Max, for all this innovation and great product philosophy, affordable, low maintenance cost, and theft proof. So I'm sure this will be very, very useful. So it's great to see solutions, properly used. So thank you so much. So now we have a little bit of time to go into Q&A. The organizers have kindly let us, go into a little bit of the break. So I have two questions actually. The first one for Dr. Kwasi. First of all, thank you for your brilliant presentation, which is true. And the question is, does the observatory take into account social and economic issues such as coastal population, livelihood, age, social, and background? So please, Dr. Kwasi, if you can answer the question.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Let me say that the social issues and economic issues are also taken into consideration, because the whole idea is to monitor what is going on so as to be able to influence policy decision and ensure that people live in harmony with nature and not being unduly affected by the challenges that we encounter along the coast. So we observe that urbanization rate is very high in the West Africa sub-region. It's increasing at a very, very high rate. And then we've also observed increasing population along the coast. And a lot of reasons can be attributed to that. And we also observe high rate of migration towards the coastal area because of the perception of jobs, availability of jobs in the coastal area. and the attraction in the coastal area. So these have also been taken into consideration. We also take into consideration the livelihoods, because we realize that the major source of livelihood along the coast is fishing. And most of the fishers land their catch on the beach, which is the natural landing site. So as these beaches get eroded, it affects the livelihood of these communities and people living along the coast. So people have to travel, a longer distance to go and land their catch, which increases the cost. And once cost gets increased, it affects the level of poverty in the coastal area. So we take all these things into consideration, the economic dynamics and the social systems, so as to be able to understand what is going on and how our monitoring activities can, add or support, decision-making in managing these areas in a sustainable way, so as to ensure the resilience of people living in the coastal area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we have another question addressed to the panel. So what are the prospects and strategies for securing more systemic funding to advance the action? So that is the implementation phase of solutions for coastal communities on the ground. So who would like to start? Unfortunately, I cannot see all of you. Okay. So maybe Dr. Kwasi, I can pin you on this as well, given that WOCA has strong involvement in funding as well. So maybe you have an answer for us.
Let me try and answer that. What I've identified is that coastal management, it's capital intensive, and going as an individual or as a unit, it becomes difficult to get what you need to be able to do this. So in West Africa, we've come up with the help of the World Bank, the WACA project, where we've identified our common problems, try to find common solutions to the common problems. And because we are working as a team in West Africa, it becomes easier to manage, because the problems are not different. What happens in Togo is not too different from what is happening in Benin, and what is happening in Guinea is not too different from what is happening in Ivory Coast. So why don't we come together and then go look for funding in this area? And again, the networks that we are building is also becoming the platform for which we are able to tell our story and be able to look for funding to support the work that we do. So I can say that the strategy to implement some of these things that we are doing is coming together and then approaching the funding agencies if possible, and then also appealing to the governments in the sub-region to let them appreciate the need for us to implement some of these things. So it's networking, and I think coming together as a group in the sub-region and networking has been very successful, and I think that is what I can say is a platform we are using in doing that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kwasi, for your explanations. And maybe if we have anyone else from the panel who'd like to jump in. Nadia?
Yes, Lorly, I'd like to say something here in addition to what Max has, Kwasi has said. I believe the question of the cost it has been, unfortunately, problematic for investment in the coast by the national agencies, the government, has been problematic because oceanography did not have yet international infrastructures where standards were fixed and discussed with the nations. But now it's time. So after the decade, after our development, through UNESCO IOC, where all the governments and the oceanographic institutions are represented, we have to make that point to become a legislative consideration for each nation, like it is in meteorology. You know, why is meteorology always having their resources, you know, kept through different phases, politics, and so on? It is because at the international level, WMO sponsors the keeping of minimum number of observations and the sharing of this information among the countries. So I think that now, after the UN decade for the ocean science, for sustainable development, this new infrastructure will come, and hopefully it will endorse institutions in each country that will take the responsibility to continuously monitor and hopefully get the result of new research and new innovation into the monitoring and forecasting. So it's a long path. We have come a long path, but we have also to develop that international infrastructure that will force our governments to have international agreements.
Great, thank you very much, Nadia, for your inputs. Do we have anyone else from the panel who'd like to jump in here? Yes, Karim,
yes,
please
Laurie,
go ahead.
yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I agree with the intervention of Professor Kwasi and also Professor Nadia. So it's very important, and this is the problem for example, in Africa, we need to reinforce and to strengthen observation system, oceanographic system, in a general way, but also particularly for sea level. So we have many projects, for example, because the finding is a very perpetual problem, and we have some solution for that. We have found some. We have some regional program for observation and so on. It's very important, and also I agree with Nadia to have. Little bit some international agreement for to reinforce our observation, particularly. Yes, we have a good program for monitoring and forecasting for meteorological services, and also we need to push on this way for oceanographic services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karim. And unfortunately, we've come to the end of this session. I'm sure that we could have gone on for another hour, but time is not permitting. So thank you so much to all our panelists. You have been absolutely wonderful. And this first part of the session on coastal solutions to sea level rise was a success and was very enlightening. And given that sea level rise is predicted to increase in the coming years, it's definitely urgent to develop more sound coastal solutions, as we heard, and to not only protect people, but nature and infrastructure, as we said. And for that, we definitely need policymakers to rely on the best available science, on local and regional specificities and inputs. And we need to work towards bridging those gaps, especially regarding data scarcity in places where the impacts of climate change will be most prominent. So thank you all. And we also hope that the UN Decade of Ocean Science will provide a much needed push to implement all this action. It's been great being your moderator today, and I thank you very much for your time. And we will now have a 20-minute break, and the next half of the session will start at 1:45. So now please go stretch your legs, grab some coffee, and the next session will focus on adaptation strategies and solutions to tackle sea level rise. And I will leave you in the very capable hands of my colleague Théophile Bongarts. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you very, very much, and have a lovely day.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think everyone can hear me well. So good afternoon in Africa, good afternoon in Europe, and good morning in America. I'm very happy to welcome you all for the second segment of the session on equitable solutions to inundation and sea level rise. And I hope that you had time to stretch your legs and to grab a coffee for the second session and to talk about solutions. So my name is Théophile Bongarts. I work with the Ocean and Climate Platform, where I am managing our cities project on coastal adaptation to sea level rise. And I have the pleasure of being your facilitator today for this session. So very briefly, you already know everything about the usual housekeeping rules. So please mute yourself, turn off your video until it is time for you to speak. And dear presenters, I have the very ungrateful task of keeping time, so apologize in advance. Before starting, of course, one more time, I thanks Ocean Vision for co-hosting this event with the Ocean and Climate Platform and the AGU team for the enormous logistical work in organizing this event. And we are virtually gathered today to discuss coastal adaptation, but please keep in mind that other ocean-related sessions are to come today, tomorrow, and until Friday. So please do not hesitate to attend the whole event. The previous parts of this session 2 dealt with scientific policy and dynamics, featuring great experts from the IPCC, regional institutions and startups. And we were clearly got that conclusion, we are heading toward an increase of sea level rise. But we have also heard many efforts are being made today to fill the data gap and to support the public decision in Europe and in Africa. So this second segment is dedicated to the most appropriate solutions that can be deployed to tackle sea level rise. And there is, of course, not one single perfect solution. And you will see today that it is a matter of combining different solutions at different time scale, at different spatial and geographical scales to better address local challenges. What is expected from a solution is to be efficient, to fight coastal erosion, to slow down the wave of marine submersion, and to protect the people. But adapting our coasts also means limiting as much as possible the impact of human settlements and development on coastal ecosystems and sedimentary dynamics. And finally, this is what we will talk about today, equitable solutions should also take into consideration the practices, traditions of coastal population and their relationship with the sea and to the risk. So having said that, feedbacks from field experience make it possible to reflect the changes and the challenges resulting from implementing the implementation process of a solution. And as with any public policy, constraints and successful implementation methods will depend on different type of institutional situation. It will depend on socio-geographical context. But the challenge in terms of governance lies in the complexity to understanding and dealing with physical and biological issues raised by sea level rise, combined with economic and cultural stakes. This is the reason why it is so important in this second segment to understand how coastal cities and territories are confronted with sea level rise and how they try to respond to it. So now I will share my screen and present you the speakers of the day, our numerous great experts So to start, we will have the mayor of Accra, the capital of Ghana, Mr. Mohamed Ajay Soa, the mayor of La Rochelle, a city on the east coast of France, Monsieur Jean-François Fontaine, Céline Damery from the Conservatoire du Littoral, the French coastal agency developing a unique coastal governance model. Then we will talk about how to finance solutions with Chip Cunliffe from AXA, who will be the voice of the insurance industry. Marcus Knigge from the Blue Action Fund, who will tell us more about how to finance adaptation. And then we'll have, to close this event, Mariana de Botton Falcon, who will represent the ECOP, the early career ocean professional that have a very important role to play in the Ocean Vision Summit. And finally, Françoise Gail, an emeritus scientist who struggled to put science at the service of action. But before that, before to hear from our speakers and experts, I would like to briefly present you the Cities program launched by the Ocean and Climate Platform 1 year ago, which is specifically dedicated to the adaptation of cities and territories to rising seas. So it is a 4-year project conducted with scientific partners, including Ocean Vision, of course, with coastal agency, like the Conservatoire du Littoral, with cities, like the city of La Rochelle, and also with a network of elected officials from the territories and international organizations. And first of all, this project aims to rely on the best available science to promote the main conclusions and ensure that the recent scientific papers, the scientific work that we are doing and we were talking about in the previous session are recognized or heard and or listened to. And scientifically rooted, the projects mobilize city managers, territorial actors, and all those who implement concrete solutions or who want to do so. And working collectively, these cities projects want to highlight the needs and the key success factor, the best practices at play to better adapt to sea level rise. And this is the job of the Ocean and Climate Platform then, to produce recommendations that will hopefully guide policymakers facing sea level rise. The cities is representing different diversity of geographical context, and we saw in the previous part that the geographical contexts are very different and very important to consider. And since it is clear that there is not a one-size-fits-all type of answer, but that the neighboring experience can help a lot. So we are therefore working in 5 different regions in West Africa and in the Mediterranean Sea, in Europe, in the west coast of US and in the Pacific. And still with this aim of identifying solutions, we have launched with some partners a call for contribution. And concrete solutions and project leaders can share what they are doing, what are their own experience. So it is mainly solutions deployed by cities, by municipalities, or local initiatives of citizens, or research programs that will help action, but all dedicated to coastal adaptation. And we are now in the process of creating an interactive map to host all these solutions that will be finalized by the summer. And if you have not done yet, you are invited to come and to share on your website your solution, your best practices to adapt to sea level rise. So now it is time to give the floor to our speakers, and I will stop sharing my screen, and I will turn to the mayor of Accra, Mohamed Ajay Soa. And Mayor, are you here? I don't see you for the moment. Mohamed Ajesoa, are you here? Okay, so for the moment, we will start with the mayor of the city of La Rochelle, Jean-François Fontaine. So you come from the world of entrepreneurship, and you also come from the world of the sea. You were a member of the French national sailing team. You set up the sailing boat company, and you are now the mayor of a city that have been severely hit in 2011 by a storm called Xynthia. So this is maybe not the only reason why the city of La Rochelle is taking a stand and acting now. You have set the objective of carbon neutral territory by 2040, and coastal areas are part of your plan. So please, Jean-François Fontaine, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much to your invitation. My English is not so good, so I will be helped by a translator who will help me to have a good translation. First of all, I want to present La Rochelle city on the French west coast. We are a medium-sized city, 80,000 people living in La Rochelle city, a little bit more with the communauté d'agglomération. Et le niveau de notre ville est très bas puisque nous sommes construits sur des zones de marais.
So hello everybody. I would like to as told before, I presented a little bit some data about the city of La Rochelle, and I would like to precise that our city is on a really especially low level side of the coastal part of the western France.
Et donc notre ville très basse a subi dans son histoire de nombreuses submersions, et la dernière submersion marine a eu lieu en 2010. Cette submersion marine portait le nom de Xynthia.
Our city has been attacked and has been under several difficult storms in our territory. The latest one was called Cynthia, and it happened in 2010.
Une partie de la ville de La Rochelle a été submergée et nous avons eu à déplorer de nombreux décès sur les communes aux alentours de La Rochelle.
A special part of the city of La Rochelle was particularly attacked by this recent storm, and we are really sad we had many lost of many people died in this during this storm.
Évidemment, cet événement climatique majeur a généré une grande sensibilité dans notre population au changement climatique.
This late storm and this latest events has risen awareness in our local population, especially in the matter of sea level rising and climate change, coastal adaptation.
Alors nous avons donc été amenés à travailler sur ces questions de submersion marine avec une double orientation.
We have been working on these topics on a double approach to eradicate these threats from sea level rising.
Alors ce travail a consisté tout d'abord à protéger plus la ville en prenant une référence technique qui était de se dire on doit se protéger contre la hauteur de Xynthia plus 20 cm et d'élaborer un ensemble de protections telles que des digues, mais surtout des protections les plus douces et les moins impactantes possibles pour le paysage de notre ville qui est un patrimoine très ancien.
This double approach is mainly based on two big projects. The first one is to protect against similar storms as we lived in 2010 with Xynthia, and to give a little bit of a spectrum, sort of a spectrum of 20 meters ahead of this former storm, and then to invest in different soft infrastructure protection systems.
20 centimeters above the sea level. Et donc, nous avons fait ces travaux pour les rendre les moins visibles possibles et ne pas abîmer la qualité urbaine de notre ville.
We have been working to provide quality infrastructure in the city of La Rochelle that it's adapted to the city and to the ecosystem.
Alors, la sensibilisation des habitants de notre territoire, de La Rochelle, a été renforcée également par des témoignages directs de grands navigateurs.
The awareness of on this kind of topics has also been raised by many sailmen from La Rochelle, such as Isabelle Autissier.
Ces navigateurs tels que Isabelle Autissier ont rendu compte de ce qu'ils ont vu eux-mêmes, et notamment Isabelle s'est rendue plusieurs fois en Antarctique et en Arctique et a pu faire des conférences pour me dire que le réchauffement climatique, la perte de glace au pôle Nord était une véritable réalité.
These public speakers and these public personalities from La Rochelle, such as Isabelle Autissier, which is a sailwoman from La Rochelle, has been speaking publicly and raising awareness on the topic, on the field of sea level rising, especially when it comes to have a point of view on what's happening actually in Antarctica within her travels.
Et nous avons complété cette sensibilisation par des expositions comme Climat et Océan qui essayent d'expliquer toute l'évolution du niveau des océans sur notre planète.
And we are actually also trying to complete this full range of sensibilization within our population in the field of sea level rising with expositions at our local museum, which is called Ocean Climat.
Et puis, bien sûr, le plus important probablement, c'est d'essayer à notre niveau de limiter cette évolution climatique. Je n'ai pas dit de l'annuler, mais de la limiter dans son ampleur par un certain nombre de mesures que je vais ensuite décliner.
But probably the most defying action for us is not to protect us from this kind of climate changes, but to progressively reduce our capacity, reinforce our capacity and reduce our emissions in order to protect us from these climate changes.
Et ce programme porte ce nom de La Rochelle, territoire zéro carbone en 2040. C'est un programme très ambitieux.
The project is called La Rochelle Zero Emissions, and it's a project that is beyond 2040.
Nous allons limiter nos émissions carbone en modifiant les modes de transport, de déplacement des habitants pour abandonner le plus rapidement possible la consommation de pétrole ou de gaz et d'utiliser des énergies qui n'émettent pas de CO2.
Our most important stake on this field is probably the field of mobility and transportation, public transportation mainly, which is the main source of CO2 emissions. And we are trying to make a bigger sensibilization of the population of La Rochelle to change the way they move around the city.
Ceci est bien sûr accompagné par des gros programmes d'isolation thermique dans l'habitat pour éviter les consommations excessives d'énergie dans la période hivernale.
This project is also completed. These actions are also completed by the isolation of public buildings, and in order to have efficient and intelligent buildings that do not produce a big amount of CO2 emissions.
En complément de ces programmes de réduction des émissions carbone, nous travaillons également sur la capacité d'absorption du carbone sur notre propre territoire.
Carbon emissions are also most likely to be efficiently absorbed in a living coastal sea, which we are working on. It has been observed that a living coastal sea soil is most likely to absorb efficiently CO2 emissions. And that's where we are working on, actually.
Et particulièrement, j'expliquais au début que nous sommes construits sur des zones de marais, des marais qui, hélas, ces années précédentes, avaient été comblés pour faire de l'habitat ou d'autres équipements. Et notre ambition, c'est de remettre ces marais en activité.
We live in an area which is submitted to big tide difference and in humid zones as well that were formerly used to develop building and housing projects for the population of La Rochelle. And we are actually working on the transition from these building projects and housing projects from the population of La Rochelle to natural areas.
Ce programme d'absorption est également important sur le littoral marin, puisque nous savons que quand le littoral marin est très vivant, avec des produits de la mer, eh bien, il est aussi un espace qui absorbe des émissions carbone.
And as I said before, this living coastal sea soil, which is formed and exists today in the coastal area of La Rochelle, is most likely and more efficiently absorbed in this living coastal sea soil than in a artificial zone.
Dans ce moment très court d'explication, je ne peux pas aller dans toutes les actions concrètes que nous menons, mais on est vraiment sur deux pieds: limiter nos émissions, augmenter notre capacité d'absorption.
In this short speech that I have the floor to talk in this situation, I cannot go further in the explanation of the different actions that we conduct at the urban community. But we have too many actions that have to remain in our minds, is to protect and to continue to reduce the emission of CO2 and the capacity of absorption of these emissions.
Et notre volonté est aussi de contribuer à des échanges internationaux, parce que beaucoup d'habitants sur la planète vivent sur des zones littorales comme nous, et nous voulons que les solutions que nous mettons en œuvre puissent être dupliquées dans un grand nombre d'espaces littoraux sur la planète.
Our challenge is also in this field to remain and to develop our sustainable cooperations with other partners all over the world, and to duplicate as we can this big ambition and this big project all around our partnerships. And this ability this capacity to develop this project is mainly remains on our capacity to develop sustainable cooperations with our partners.
Nous avons des coopérations au Mexique, des coopérations en Indonésie, mais ce sont des coopérations où nous cherchons aussi à apprendre des solutions qui ont été utilisées dans ces espaces.
We have actually cooperations with other partners all around the world, especially with Indonesia and Mexico in Southeast Asia and in the Gulf of Mexico near the United States. And we are also open to learn from the solutions they are taking actually action in these places, not only to give solutions, but also to learn the way they implement their own solutions.
C'est la raison pour laquelle nous sommes très heureux d'intervenir dans le cadre de Ocean Vision Summit.
That's why we are very happy to participate in this event, international event.
Et que nous sommes prêts, bien sûr, à de nombreuses coopérations sur des sujets qui sont essentiels pour la vie sur le littoral.
And we are eager to look forward on this on cooperations in the field of coastal adaptations and sea level rise awareness.
Nous bénéficions également du soutien technique de l'Université de La Rochelle, ainsi que d'autres équipes qui nous accompagnent dans ces démarches.
we have many scientific and technical approaches also on these topics, mainly thanks to the teams of La Rochelle University and our own teams at the urban community, which is on a scientific approach very interesting in this field of coastal adaptation.
Ce que l'on peut dire, c'est qu'il y a une très grande adhésion des habitants de notre territoire à cette démarche qui aujourd'hui fait consensus.
What we can say today is that the population of La Rochelle is aware of these climate challenges, and they are eager to continue to work towards these challenges along with us, with public policies.
Et je vous remercie beaucoup de votre attention.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jean-François, and thank you for giving us the inspiring example of La Rochelle. Thank you also to emphasize this link between adaptation and mitigation. This is the same fight, same struggle, so it's very important. Thank you for participating and speaking in French too. Sorry for we didn't have the opportunity to translate your speech, but thank you for being here. And I recommend to all those who can go to La Rochelle to visit the Climate Ocean exhibition to perfect their knowledge on the subject. And it is a great way to work with the population and to help them to appropriate this thematical and other stakes of adaptation. Now we will stay a bit in France, but at a different territorial scale. Céline, who is with us today, welcome, Céline. You have a very rich experience in coastal and small island conservation projects, especially in the Mediterranean Sea, in Western Africa and in Europe. The Conservatoire du Littoral is a public establishment which has no equivalent in other countries, and we are very glad to have you with us today to present what is the Conservatoire du Littoral. You have been running an experimental project for several years to test different methods of adaptation to climate change and sea level rise. So please, I invite you to tell us more about your activities and the result of this experimental project. It's your turn, Céline.
Thank you, Théophile, and thank you for having invited me to participate. Yes, as you were saying, so personally, I'm working at the Conservatoire du Littoral since more than 12 years now. And so our public agency is in link under the supervision of the Ministry in charge of ecology. We've been created in 1975, and our mission is to ensure on the long-term protection of sensitive territories on coastal areas by land acquisition. So we are owner of different kind of lands on the coastal areas and also on seashores. And we have a specificity is that we are not owner, we are owner of the site, but we are not managing our sites. And the daily management is entrusted to some partners. We have nearly 327 organizations, local authorities, NGOs, which are in charge of the daily management of our sites. If you can move on to the next slide. Sorry, I didn't know that you were putting the PowerPoint, so I'll just go briefly on this one, just to highlight that in France, we have for sure different seafronts with the Mediterranean, with the Atlantic coast, with the Channel, but also due to our overseas territories, we have Indian Ocean, Caribbean, Pacific. So you can imagine that in France, we have a different kind of context, different kind of risks, which affects our coastline. We have also very important, coast represent for France also very important things regarding human, because 1 people on 8 in France are living on the coast. We are nearly 2 or 3 times more urbanized areas on the coast compared to the whole territory. And for sure, we have also an important and great nature. And next slide, please. So I was just introducing the conservatoire just before. Maybe you can move on to the next slide. So we're owner of some natural sites. We're in charge also to preserve a remarkable landscape and maintain the land spirit and the memory of the past activities on the site. In our duties, the sites have to be open to the public, and we try to ensure a sustainable development and a balanced management in link with all our local partners. The manager organization I was talking before, but we have also some different kind of agreements with managers, farmers, with whom we're discussing when we implement some concrete project of protection. Next slide. So just to pursue in this kind of figures, today the Conservatoire is owner of more than 200,000 hectares, which represent a network of 750 sites and nearly 13% of the French coastline. We have established a strategy on the long term because the target is at the horizon 2050, and we're expecting to acquire and to protect nearly 300,000 of hectares in a network of 1 south, which is quite impressive. So if, as you may imagine, we're owner, sorry, next slide. As you may imagine, we're owner of several thousands of coastal and of hectares of coastal natural areas. And so the climate change is for us an issue. Since many years, we've been leading some different kind of studies to measure the impact of climate change on our properties, and mostly also to try to find some solution to adapt, and notably with an approach which is to accept the movement and the movement of the coastline. For sure, the land purchasing strategy at the horizon 2050 will help us to integrate the climate change parameters and its impact on our coast. But we are also, through different kind of local, regional, or national, or even European projects, implementing some concrete solutions. It can be soft solutions, it can be nature-based solutions, it can be different kind of operations. And we try to also to promote the acceptability of this shoreline movement regarding all our partners involved in coastal conservation with us. Next slide. So one of the projects which is ongoing now is the Adapto project supported by the EU Life, which is an which aims to explore different kind of solutions to the impact of climate change on the coast, and notably by advocating toward an adaptive coastal management. So we have 10 pilot sites in the different seafronts I was evoking, 9 in French, metropolitan France, 1 in Guyana. And so with different kind of coastal environments, sandy coasts, polder, beaches, salt marshes, mangroves. And on these 10 sites, we try to help the local population, the authorities, the managers, the users, to build their vision for the future of the site, and through a kind of interdisciplinary approach. Next slide. Regarding this multidisciplinary approach, we try to not only have a kind of scientific vision based only on the modelization, which can be sometimes very anxiogynous. And so we try to build the project and the different scenario of evolution of the project, considering both the risks, the landscape, the economy, the social perception, the biodiversity. And so we try to make a link between all these different disciplines without one prevailing to another one. And so in order to try to find at the end, in an agreement for sure with the local stakeholders, what is the best compromise, the best balance possible for the future of the site, combining both the natural issues and also the social economic issues. Next slide, please. And so here I wanted to share with you some first results and conclusion, because as I was saying, it is a project which is planned to end next year. So we have different kind of parallel activities on the 10 sites, but the things that we have to take into account is that the soft management of coastline is very important regarding the fact that the natural habitats can be resilient and can be support of very ecosystemic services. But the solutions we try to implement are maybe complicated to start and to initiate, but we need to have in mind the economical benefit on the long term. The solutions implementing are quite like, for example, having some kind of buffer zone are a good tool in order to avoid some natural risk, and notably the impacts on human and socioeconomic activities. And we have to integrate also that this kind of project we're leading also in new opportunities for in order to have a nice living environment and landscapes. So to do that, we have to learn from the past. So when I was saying that we have to accept, for example, the movement of the shoreline, is because when you see all the past archives and modelization, the movement of the shorelines in the centuries has always existed. So we need to take this lesson from the past and accept this. We have to see the opportunities to change. We need to have an adaptive management. And it's important to do that, to work at the good scales, temporal, territorial, this different kind of things, and also to involve the local population in the early stage. So to make them very active in the choice that can be made for the solutions, the projects which could be implemented at the site. When we're talking about removing some riprapes, when we're talking about not rebuilding some dikes, which is at the front line. We're talking about the relocation of activities or even simply of parkings, which are sometimes very close to natural areas. So it's a long-term process, and we have to accept that. Next slide. So this was it for me. I hope my presentation allowed you to have a brief overview of the different projects that we are leading today regarding adaptation to climate change. And following the intervention of Mr. Mayor Fontaine, as you, Théophile, were saying, we truly think also that we have long-term experiences regarding climate change, but it's also important to exchange and to share our good practices, but also our difficulties with other organizations which are like us. And so we're trying notably to make a kind of concrete and active network with different kind of organizations at international scale about this issue. And so we hope for the future to have connection with some of you.
Thank you very much, Céline. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very, very interesting. Thank you for the strong messages at the end of your presentation and all the examples that you gave. So thank you. We understand the interest in the model of the Conservatoire du Littoral, which will buy coastal territories to manage them in a sustainable way. And now in the face of climate change, develops an experimental approach and test different options and solutions these projects offer a lot of good, many advantages. So I think we are all curious to know what will be the final conclusion of the Adapto projects. And thanks again for your presentation.
Thank you.
Now, we will start the second part of this session on financing sustainable adaptation solutions. So we have with us Chip Cunliffe from AXA XL. So thank you for being with us today, Chip. You established and now you manage AXA's Ocean Risk Initiative, which works on identifying innovative insurance and finance ocean-related risk solutions. More specifically, you also work on how to integrate coastal ecosystems into insurance risk model. So the role of insurer is being mentioned more and more, and I think there is a lot of interest in that. So Chip, how do you approach these issues, and what are the main challenges and solutions to sea level rise for you and your company. Please.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today, of course, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody on the call. Look, I'm going to talk, of course, from an insurance industry perspective, but I know that we also have an investment standpoint, but I'm going to leave that to Marcus. So I'm going to solely focus really on the risk modeling and risk transfer side of the work that we do. As Celine outlined, and doubtless, most of you or many of you are very aware of the complex variety of risks that need to be addressed from the changes that are taking place in the ocean, from ocean warming and an increase in that sea level, of course, and storm intensity means that we are under pressure from the coast, and there are various studies out there about the fact that there are 800 million people likely to be at risk from storm surge, from extreme weather events by 2050, and that may have an annual price tag of around $1 trillion. So fairly significant, of course. And the insurance industry itself, continues to pay out many billions of dollars a year for extreme weather events, as I'm sure you're fairly aware. But up until now, resilience building in coastal areas has mainly been focused on grey infrastructure. And in talking to my colleagues within the industry itself, nature-based solutions are really rarely spoken of, and yet we know, just from Celine's presentation there, that integrating them alongside more traditional coastal defences, almost are a critical component of disaster risk management and climate adaptation. And nature-based solutions have that triple bottom line. They are cost effective, they have significant environmental, social, and economic benefits, and they reduce that exposure to risk. So what's not to like? And indeed, part of my role within AXA is starting to think about how we integrate nature-based solutions into our business. But as part of that, we need to be able to provide, we need to, I suppose, have a more fundamental understanding and develop the enabling conditions to make the likelihood of using nature-based solutions more successful. And from my perspective, that really revolves around possibly a lack of literacy in understanding nature-based solutions in both the public and the private sector. I see sort of four areas. We need a greater understanding of the range of benefits that they provide, from coastal protection to carbon sequestration, to nurseries for fish, to links to tourism. All of those different things need to be integrated. I think we need to address some of the science and research gaps that we have, and really to identify the value of the nature that are providing those benefits. So from the revenue streams to the conservation financing mechanisms to invest in nature, and maybe Marcus might go into that a little bit more. We also need to quantify the benefits of hybrid approaches, so where we are able to combine both green and grey infrastructure, and so developing the metrics around that, but also I suppose almost including nature-based solutions in cost-benefit analyses, and then developing proof of concept studies as well. So those are sort of four areas that we need to focus on. However, I also wanted to indicate that, although there are challenges there, and there are challenges for the business and for the industry and for everybody, we also have some options in our toolbox already. And I sort of see those being sort of, I suppose, 5 different areas. Number one is, the possibility of offering preferential rates or subsidies in exchange for more stewardship activities. So managing and preserving ecosystems for their protective benefits, for their carbon sequestration benefits, etc., and something that we could potentially do, perhaps alongside, some of the banks as well. I think that the use of parametrics, so the payout of an insurance policy based on a measurable parameter, whether that's wind speed or sea level or ocean temperature, let's say, and by doing that, by having those triggers, we can facilitate climate finance flows into countries that are likely to be impacted by the slow onset climate risks. So small island developing states and the least developed countries are sort of the areas that I'm thinking of. But then I've got three maybe other areas as well. And I wanted to give a very, very brief sort of introduction to some of the work that we're doing in this space to provide some I suppose, some context really. So the third piece is about how we quantify the risk reduction value of natural assets within the insurance risk modeling framework. And so at the moment we're working on something called the Coastal Risk Index, and that's really starting to integrate mangroves and coral reefs into our risk models so that we can more accurately price risk and then support new and different risk management solutions. And of course, by doing that, we're able to hopefully catalyze the protection and management of those ecosystems as well. So the first part of the index is focusing on flood hazard with and without mangroves and coral reefs. And we're looking at that today, in 2030, and in 2050 as well. So we as an insurer base our risk profiles for our clients on historical data, as I'm sure you're aware. We provide annual policies for individuals or for our clients. But of course, some clients and indeed investors need a longer term time horizon. So let's say, 20 to 30 years hence from now. How do we therefore quantify the risks of an ecosystem degrading? So what happens if your mangrove or your reef degrades? Well, of course, the likelihood is that your the risk profile of that entity or that community on land will increase. We need to know that today. And at the moment, we don't model that sufficiently enough to be able to price that risk accurately. And so one of the reasons that we're doing this is really to better understand what the risk profile is at different times into the future as sea levels start to rise and potentially an increased intensity of storms takes place as well. A fourth area that we are looking at, and I think we have in the toolbox, is about ensuring the ecosystem or indeed the ecosystem services that they actually provide. You may have heard there's a coral reef insurance product off Mexico. We're starting to develop a mangrove insurance product with our with the Nature Conservancy and University of California, Santa Cruz. And we undertook some research last year really about quantifying the cost effectiveness of mangroves for flood risk reduction and the cost of restoration, which is about $23,000 in Caribbean and $45,000 in Florida. But the flood reduction benefits per hectare were between, well, in fact, we capped it at $50,000. In some areas, it was over 100,000. So we already know that mangroves offer that significant flood reduction benefit, much more so than the cost of restoration. And that being the case, though we know that over 3,000 kilometers of coastline across 20 territories and countries within the Caribbean have cost-effective opportunities for mangrove restoration, and therefore the use of a potential mangrove insurance product to pay for that. And we've undertaken some market analysis, different product analysis, and identifying potential customers, which are likely to be the public sector in the first instance, as we move forward. And I think that's a really critical point in the use of insurance. And the last point, if I may, is how we need to be working together across the insurance industry, across finance, across governments to develop nature-based solutions and indeed the finance and products to ensure that we utilize nature-based solutions as well. And I co-chair an organization called the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, which is looking to drive $500 million worth of investment into nature-based solutions by 2030, using different insurance and finance products to do that. We know that we can't do this alone. We have to do this with others. And that's why Aura is really critical piece of our puzzle. Please do go to oceanriskalliance.org and you'll find a huge amount actually of work already taking place in this space that relate to the products that I've started to describe there, but other ones as well. And I think that we're all in a better position, but of course we need to move this dial very quickly if we are to help manage the risks to the most vulnerable around the world. So let me leave it there. I hope that has provided some indication of what we see as from the insurance industry.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chip, for this presentation. Thank you for sharing with us your toolbox. I also thank you for insisting on the role of the mangroves, ecosystems, and nature-based solutions that offer many co-benefits for the whole coastal systems, and both for the people and the biodiversity, and it is a preferred option in some regions where it can grow, of course. So it's important to recall that mangroves act as a buffer against the impact of climate change, and they are a great solutions to contribute to mitigation also by absorbing CO2 emissions. So these blue carbon ecosystems must be preserved. But thank you. Now, Marcus Knieger, I think that supporting those solutions and projects that benefit to coastal communities is also what the Blue Action Fund pushes forth. So you are executive director of the Blue Action Fund, you worked before at the WWF, European Policy Union, then at the Pew Charitable Trust, and now you're responsible for implementing and evaluating the Blue Action Fund grants program. So I think it is very interesting today to understand how your organization allocates funding to address sea level rise, and which projects have been already benefits from it. So Marcus, we're listening to you.
Thank you, Théophile. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for listening in. Funny enough, first of all, I would really like to say that a number of things that Chip just said, they really resonate also within the Blue Action Fund, starting, of course, with the importance of nature-based solutions, but also that this is a collective effort and that you need all the different types of financing and actors involved. And obviously, the Blue Action Fund is only one little piece of this puzzle, hopefully an important one, but yet it's still a very small piece. And as a third theme that came up is also this important of good data and information, of assessment of actually the benefits of these type of measures, which ultimately is required by any kind of funder, be it private or be it public. And with that saying, I'm coming to the Little Blue Action Fund and what we are doing. And I think I've been working on ocean protection for the last 15 plus years, and what most of us have seen is that there is an increasing awareness of ocean challenges, challenges faced by the oceans, but also potential solutions in the oceans, and initiatives dealing with the oceans, starting, of course, also with the SDG 14 and everything related to that. And the Blue Action Fund is to some extent also one of these initiatives stemming from this increased knowledge and awareness. If you go to the next slide, it's an independent foundation established by the German government, and we really have a triple bottom line, so to speak. We start with the marine biodiversity and the recovery of fish stocks. but we also aware, usually centering on marine protected areas. We are aware that this cannot be done in splendid isolation, so we are working extremely closely with the communities involved and look into food security and poverty issues and these kind of things. And as a third bottom line, it's also addressing climate change, mainly through adaptation, but also a little bit through mitigation, depending on the different projects that we fund. Slide. And the important feature of this Blue Action Fund is really that we are solely funded by public funders. So Germany invested more than 80 million by now. Sweden invested around 18 million. France is going to go up to 10. And so what we are basically doing is challenging official development assistance instead of the traditional way to give it from one country into another country, usually from ministry to another ministry. We are provided with some of this funding to hand it over to in a more efficient and effective manner to smaller projects and to projects carried out by NGOs. So what you've seen is that we are a relatively young foundation. So on paper, we were established in 16 and we were launched in 17. So this is year number 4. And if you put on the next slide, you can see that we have grown relatively fast in terms of aggregated resources. We started with 24 million and beginning of this year, we were at 140 million. Obviously, if you compare that to the scope of the challenge, this is not even a drop in the ocean, I guess, but it's a good starting point. And if you see how fast we have been growing, you see that there is actually quite some interest from public funders also to get into the space if there are financing instruments that are able to provide them also with the security that this is in line with the international standards, with the World Bank standards, with risk assessments, with all the due diligence that public funding is actually requiring. Slide. I already briefly mentioned that the cornerstone of our projects are marine protected areas. Obviously, this is not to say that other areas are not important, but this is where our niche is. And in that niche, we have this focus that we not just look at the environment, but also at the livelihoods. And that, of course, includes also protection against sea level rise. That includes a lot of nature-based solution in terms of mangrove, either protection or also restoration, seaweed meadows. It includes sand dunes. It includes coral reefs. So all these kind of nature-based solutions our project partners are actually working on. All our projects are situated in ODA recipient countries. That's just by definition of the funding that we get. And usually we do a big effort to involve smaller organizations in our projects, which is sometimes challenging because, as I mentioned already, all our projects need to be fully aligned with international environmental and social standards. And that is also why a typical project for us is in the area of 1 to 4 million euros. If you go to the next slide. I mentioned, or I wanted to mention one specific funding window. We successfully applied for additional money from the Green Climate Fund, which is of course yet another major international funding instrument. But I wanted to highlight it because also there it shows that a body that was not necessarily set up initially to focus on oceans and coastline is becoming increasingly aware of the importance of these issues and therefore decided also to equip the Blue Action Fund with some funding. And that is a special funding window where we really look into protection and sustainable management of coastal ecosystems, including rehabilitation. That is limited to Tanzania, Mozambique, Madagascar, and South Africa, but we have a second call end of this year that is coming up. And just to give you an impression, this is the second call is going to cover something like 25-30 million euros. So this is definitely some resources. If you go to the next slide. Yeah, I guess it's hard to read, but it shows you a little bit the state of the program. So we are all over the world already. We have a current call at the Atlantic coast. So there will be numerous blue dots, hopefully soon in the future. And you see also that we are working quite a lot in the Western Indian Ocean, which is the area that is targeted with this EBA funding window that I just mentioned, funded mainly by the Green Climate Fund and the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. But we work in particular with NGOs. That's our implementing partners. And they work together again then with smaller NGOs, with universities, with the park authorities, with all different type of actors. Maybe also for this audience, we don't fund basic research. So for us, always knowledge gathering is important as long as it's related to the project itself. And I think if you go to the next slide, that might also make a little bit the circle in particular with the last bullet that in my experience, once you have set up a funding vehicle that is showing success in terms of being able to identify projects, evaluate projects, fund projects, often it's actually obviously it's still challenging, but it's not the toughest challenge to attract additional funding for yourself to grow bigger, because you are established. The first costs are invested in terms of setting up systems and getting recognition that you are out there. What we are facing ourselves now in is that we are really looking for bankable projects, so projects that are able to comply with our requirements. They are complex, and I think also increasingly we are under, as any funder, we are increasingly under pressure also to show measurably progress, and I think that is really an issue that is still a difficult one, and I think also where any funder is really in need to see these various benefits, in particular when it comes to nature-based solutions, where you have these multiple benefits in terms of economic values, social values, ranging from tourism to as Chip just mentioned, to protection of certain infrastructure, more inland, to biodiversity values. That is really important, and more important to be able to identify specific benefits and to quantify them. And it's at some stage it's hard to convince other donors and funders to make further investments if you stay on the general line, like it makes logical sense to achieve certain benefits. You really have to demonstrate them, and I think that is something that is where everyone is struggling with. But I think it's one of those areas where also joint investments are needed. So long story short, I think there's a really exciting time in terms of political attention being given to the oceans and to coastlines. So there are major opportunities for projects, for ideas, for investments. And there are new ambitious conservation targets hopefully coming up. Even the existing ones are ambitious if they are properly implemented. Let's see what happens this year. And I think there's also increased funding opportunities, definitely from the public, but also from the private. So it's really exciting times, and we have to pay attention that we take best advantage of this window of opportunity. And I think I'll leave it like that.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Thank you for your optimism. And I think that in order to build adaptation programs, it is of course essential for everyone and all the people participating today to understand how the funders organize themselves. And you tell us about who are your implementing partners and how it is possible to access this such funds. So we wish you the best in developing this young initiative. So, thank you. Now, there is a lot of question in the chat, but I think we will not have the time to take it. So there is a question for Chip, for you, Marcus. So please feel free to answer it in the chat, but we'll not have the time to take specific moments to answer it together. We are coming to the last part of this event. And this morning, before our event started, the early career ocean professional met and debated among themselves on the issue of coastal adaptation and solutions. And they have done the same for each session of the Ocean Vision Summit. And today, Mariana represents them in our session. So Mariana, you are a second-year master's student in Utrecht University in Netherlands. So welcome, and we are very happy to hear about what are the ECOP's main messages and what they want to share with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. During this summit, we are hosting daily early career professional interactive sessions where we encourage participants to provide their input. We had 3 different sessions, and I will talk through some of the ideas that came out in these breakout sessions. Our first session was bridging the gap between natural sciences and ocean governance related to sea level rise. We talked about the specific case in the Netherlands, where they have developed strong knowledge in solid barriers to protect from floods. This knowledge can be exported to other countries, but this one solution cannot be applied to all coastlines. Therefore, we need a local and adapted approach. We have lots of scientific knowledge, but we're missing local experts and local stakeholders. We're also missing people from economics and social sciences that will help us bridge the gap between knowledge and the needs of the community. So in general, we concluded that we need local partners in all projects. One of the ideas that came up is that we should include non-Western partners in all projects to give a better perspective, come up with different solutions, and broaden our perspective due to different backgrounds and points of view. Our second breakout session was about ocean literacy and education around coastal processes. We know that coastal erosion, transportation, and development are major threats for coastal processes. We also know that there needs to be an inclusion of working with government, institutes, local communities, and international agencies for us to find sustainable solutions, to be able to protect resources and help with pollution. We also talked about the important role that media plays in these ocean solutions in ways that they can encourage the conservation, the rules in fisheries, the do's and don'ts for the ocean, as well as promoting volunteer works in this field. A way that we thought it's really good to spread ocean literacy is with citizen science. It works really well because it's a very hands-on activity. Many such programs can be found around the world, including Singapore, where some of our ECO participants work. For example, also beach cleanups or walking tours through mangroves and coastal areas can help really well. So a student and ECO competitions involving ocean technologies could be a fun, hands-on way to encourage ocean literacy. So for example, an underwater student robotics. In our third session, that the topic was creating sustainable livelihoods for a social science lens. We know that managing the issue and providing sustainable livelihood at the same time can be a very difficult process. Surveys and educational structures are really important to manage these issues, as well as workshops to be able to work around local communities. Unfortunately, a lot of the times, economic necessity overrides sustainability. So in this way, we really need to show the problems and be able to raise awareness due to being a disconnect between what's important for the implementation of the projects, but also what's important to the community. Since we had participants from all around Africa, Europe, and Oceania, they noted that although on the African continent, there are gender inclusion issues in the fishery space, in New Zealand, women contribute a lot to fishing activities. So sharing of knowledge between these communities would be very valuable to break down barriers or stereotypes. We concluded that communication is key. which information the community needs and how this information is delivered. It can be through comic books or radio shows. This information needs to be suitable projects for communicating these kind of issues to the communities for all different kinds of education backgrounds. And it's also required that we have a continuity on the communication, even when the project has finished. Also, a more top-down approach will help us develop solutions and get the local communities involved, making them sustainable over time and creating an inclusive environment where we can all learn from each other. Thank you so much. We have 2 more sessions happening tomorrow morning, so please check them out if you are available in the program and join.
Thank you very much, Mariana. It seems you had a very rich debate, and we note all these messages, and you can count on the Ocean Vision excellent communication skills to relay them. So to conclude this session, we are privileged to be able to welcome a true ocean figure who is a specialist in what very few people know, the deep ocean, where it is difficult to go, but where the discoveries are rich in lessons. And Françoise Gail had the opportunity to visit them many times. So I will skip on many of your roles and activities, which are numerous, but Françoise, you are among others the Vice President of the Ocean Climate Platform, and you're a member of the French IOC UNESCO delegation. So welcome, Françoise, and thank you for closing this event. Françoise.
Thank you, Théophile, for driving this session, and thanks again to the Ocean Vision Summit team and the Ocean and Climate Platform for organizing this delightful session with all these fascinating speakers. The ocean is facing a tumultuous wave of challenges, and we have to make peace with nature, said the excellent Peter Thompson. And by bringing together diverse panel of speakers with different backgrounds, we have designed a preliminary landscape of equitable solutions for coastal inundations and sea level rise. Coastal adaptation mechanisms connect ocean and land processes, and as recalled by Hans Otto Partners, can be a crucial interface to better understand first, how different systems interact, and second, how they are affected by climate change. Equitable solutions to sea level rise start with the need of a deep production of knowledge from observational technologies, and this was well illustrated with the WACA project and with Nadia Pinardi in offering how observing infrastructures with new science paradigms, such as urban oceanography, can enable ocean and coastline monitoring to mitigate climate disaster. But sometimes small is also beautiful. And it was exciting to hear from young people and startups like Wavency and Obscape how using smart and simple tools may improve climate prediction by filling ocean data gaps. Yet, knowing when and where physical events might occur or how intense they might be is not enough. Coastline adaptation strategies in cities like Accra or the zero carbon city of La Rochelle have illustrated how knowledge-based policies are in fact involving a multi-layer implementation process. And enlarging the perspective to regional or national territories can help mitigate the effect of these measures on wider space, as shown by the Conservatoire du Littoral. Assuming the importance of sustainable adaptation solutions, we must orient funds effectively, taking into account priorities and cost efficiency as a proposal by the Blue Action Fund. And AXA XL showed that integrating nature-based solutions and other innovative insurance solutions may play a major role in community ocean risk management. At least, Mariana de Bottom-Falcon has underlined how bridging the gap between natural science and ocean governance related to sea level rise was important by integrating a great diversity of actors for constructing adapted solutions. So starting in 2016 with the IOC slogan, "The ocean we need for the future we want," we arrived 5 years later to the science we need for the ocean we want. Starting this year, the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development that Karim Hilmi from the IOC has perfectly illustrated. Swimming the Talk is the title of the most recent OCP policy brief. And by analogy, we can use this word for this session. Swimming the Solutions, a new way of reaching the land in difficult weather, managing an unstable coastline, searching for fundings and sustainable solutions through a diversity of physical and economical forcing and human position. And so seeking the best way to fill the gap between scientific knowledge and politic actions. Yes, we can. And see you next year for illustrating this challenging pathway with the evolution of cities and other Ocean Decade projects involved in climate change impacts on coastal areas and cities. Thank you again to all of you.
Thank you very much, Françoise, and we are right in time to conclude this event. So thank you for making the link between the different interventions we had today, Françoise, and I ask you all a virtual applause for our speakers, presenters. Thank you, everyone. Do not hesitate to contact us, to contact Ocean Vision for more information. If you had questions that we couldn't answer today, we are here to accelerate action, to make connection, and I hope it was for you of interest. So thank you very much to everyone.